Together, we must turn ideas into action. Together, we must stay ahead of the threat. Today, we shape the next decade of cyber defence.
Hello, thank you for that. Morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today, not least because it meant I got to tell my children I was performing live on stage at the SEC and then just refused to elaborate further, so this is good for me. It's been a great conference so far, though. I think it's been fantastic, and it's great to have CYBERUK back in Glasgow again. It's been 7 years, believe it or not, since it was last year. I don't think any of us could have predicted back then what the following 7 years would hold for us all, but obviously we've had events like COVID that have fundamentally changed how many of us work, how we communicate, how we collaborate, and it's also forced a huge acceleration of digital adoption and digital transformation programs right across organizations and companies. Accompanying this, we've also seen some rapid technological advancements and disruption, and we've seen the threat landscape evolve at pace and also at scale, as discussed in some of the other sessions that we've heard. Now, it was actually over 10 years ago, way back in 2015, that the Scottish Government first published its first ever cyber resilience strategy. And while many of the principles and outcomes within that strategy still hold true today, largely, the ways in which we have to evolve and grow in order to meet the challenges are ever-changing. In fact, even back at the last CyberUK in Glasgow in 2019, we did not yet have the strategic framework for a cyber resilient Scotland, which and its action plans as well, and they guide our cyber policy and resilience objectives, all under the vision that Scotland thrives by being a digitally secure and resilient nation. We didn't yet have the tremendous growth and success of the Cyber Scotland Partnership, a critical element of our approach that brings together key stakeholders and organizations with reach and influence into their own communities, which help us share and promote cyber messaging and resilience building at scale. And we also didn't have SC3, the Scottish Cyber Coordination Centre, which acts as a focal point for cybersecurity, resilience, maturity, and coordination across the entire public sector in Scotland. If you would like to hear any more about any of these initiatives, then please drop by the Cyber Scotland Pavilion. You'll find it standing at the end of Cyber Scotland Street in the Exhibitors Hall, and you can go and speak to the team to find out more about this. But these things do absolutely fundamentally change the way in which Scotland as a small nation does cyber, bringing together people and communities to face the challenges and also recognize the opportunities that we have in this space. And I think that's really what this session is going to be about. Now, we have an excellent and very distinguished panel of guests who are experts in this space, and it's great to have them all here to participate. So without further ado, if you join me in welcoming the panelists to the stage. Like the musical stings.
It is. I thought we were going to sing.
So welcome again. I'm sure that everybody would much rather hear from them than from me, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves by way of an opening question I'll ask, just to get us started off. But I'm very conscious that if we're talking about cyber resilience within Scotland, we have far too many potential topics to cover, so I think it'd be best if we let you, the audience, steer the discussion. So we will be using Slido. I think that we have a QR code up there in order to access Slido, and I'd encourage everyone to go on and either add your questions or upvote the existing questions there so that we can choose the order in which we tackle them. And I've got the iPad here, which I will figure out how to use as I ask my opening questions. So for now, if we kick off with the introductions and initial questions, then I'll start with Maggie. So Maggie, where is Scotland genuinely ahead of the curve, and what advantages do you think smaller nations hold?
So good morning, everybody. Lovely to be here. Alan, you've already outlined some of the initiatives that we've taken since 2015, and I think that's where Scotland has made a difference, because we've been able to build our foundations, look at how we build on those foundations and do scaling, and now we're at the position where we have the new strategy. So all of that's led to a collaborative environment, an ecosystem that we've built, which allows the partnership and one nation effort to help us deliver. You've talked about the Cyber Scotland Partnership, and Karen's in a much better place to talk about that in terms of the cyber cluster. But Scotland's a nation of small businesses. We're a small nation with a lot of public sector infrastructure. But I think there's a couple of places where we're really, really batting above our weight, specifically in the lifelong learning space. We deal with our population from young to old. We've embedded cyber resilience and cyber security training within our education system. We introduce cybersecurity concepts through storytelling. We've got an absolutely phenomenal book called The Bongles and The Crafty Crows. And what it does, all of those books have been into primary one school bags during World Book Week. So they've all taken those home. And if you want to see it, it's on the Scotland stand, but it's also in all of our libraries. And the story is about how you have passwords, how you look after your stuff, because the crows are going to come along and steal it. And those basic concepts were conveyed in a fun way, and there's little toys and stuff, so it's all part of a whole holistic approach. We target students through a free resource called Cyber Resilience in You. The Scotland Cyber Partnership covers Age Scotland, it covers Skills Scotland, and I particularly like that the Skills Scotland piece covers our Scottish cricket team went to India, and the trials and challenges of accessing all of their stuff through Wi-Fi, and they did a film which goes out to all sports entities, and the girls in it were having fun because they said, this is not something that we would normally do, and about using normal storytelling, normal people, to get some quite tricky messages over. So the third sector, we use that to get to a lot of our more vulnerable older people. But we use lots of people, and you in this room can help us to get that message out to folks. So all of it helps to drive that public awareness, to drive the understanding of cyber risks, and so people know how to protect themselves and how they can report whether they've been the victim of cybercrime, because it's one of the most underreported crimes. And it helps then to strengthen our workforce. Because the education to industry pipeline is really emphasising our national emphasis on skills as a strategic priority. So I think that's absolutely where we do hit above our weight.
Great, thanks, Maggie. And you're right to mention the phenomenal success of the Bongles, not just with children, but also with conference delegates, as we had a stack of them, and they've disappeared almost immediately. Yeah, they're almost as popular as the Highland cows. Great, so we'll move on then to Karen. We mentioned the SME landscape in Scotland. So Karen, if you could introduce yourself, and then if you could answer the following. So what do you think is the hardest part of getting SMEs, which does form the backbone of Scotland's economy, to take cyber seriously?
So hi everyone, I'm Karen Meakin, I'm the CEO of Scotland Is, and we are the trade body and cluster manager for Scotland's digital and tech sector. And as part of that ecosystem, we manage a cyber cluster of over 400 cyber companies based in Scotland. We've been a cluster manager for almost 10 years, and we started the cyber cluster back in 2018. For us, looking at the wider Scotland ecosystem, it's awareness. So for SMEs, their cyber challenges are battled against keeping the lights on in business, so cash flow, growth, investment. And what we've seen is that cyber just keeps being pushed down the to-do list. And some of that is because it's too complex, or it's seen as too complex, it's seen as too expensive. There's no one who is taking responsibility, who's responsible for our sector or our business being cyber secure and resilient. So there's a bit of a gap between awareness and action. And some of the things that we've done through the cluster and in partnership with the Cyber Scotland Partnership and various other partners is support some of that knowledge from the very basics of helping other sectors and other industries understand the simplest of things like strong passwords, like two-factor authentication, taking it right back to the beginning, helping boards understand that, in fact, cyber is everyone's problem, from your marketing to your HR, to your CEO, to your board, to your techies. So we've worked very hard over the last 10 years to be sharing that information out. Cyber is no longer an IT challenge, and for a long time it's sat with your tech team. They'll figure it out. The sector itself have, for well over a decade, created products and services that are secure by design. We're no longer going back and securing something. But the message that we're trying to share out is cybersecurity is no longer a technical issue, it's an operational issue. It's an operational risk, it's a reputational risk. We've put out lots of funding to help lots of companies across Scotland and across lots of sectors to secure that first level of security in their cyber essentials. We've done lots of events and we run lots of programmes in partnership with lots of our partners to just lift that knowledge and make it less scary, because there's lots of things that SMEs can do in that first step that just raises their cyber posture. But that work will continue. And we've got a managed service provider cluster, which is helping us do that as well. So as a community in Cyber Scotland Partnership, the goal is to make sure that Scotland as a nation is the most cyber secure, resilient and trusted nation, and we're all working to that.
Great, thank you. And next on the panel we have Jess. Jess, again, if you could introduce yourself and tell us from your experience in your role in industry, what challenges and changes are you seeing, and with regards to either the technology that we use or the trends across the landscape more generally?
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, Jess Amory. I'm the IT director for the Weir Group. So for those who don't know who we are or what we do, we are a multinational engineering technology company who are based here in Glasgow. For those in the audience or who are watching, you may know us as Weir Pumps, who I think have been a household name in Glasgow for over 150 years. But now our products and services are sold pretty much in every corner of the world. My job is to look after our end-to-end IT technology suite covering infrastructure and operations. And that has been quite a recent change for me. Prior to this, I was heading up our global cyber operations capability and completed quite a kind of significant transformation program in that space. And for us, obviously it would be amiss for me not to mention right now the changes that we're seeing and the drive in positioning and technology that's surrounding AI. I think AI is starting to dominate almost every single conversation that's had, and I'm sure that I'm not alone in seeing that trend across my organisation and across the broader industry. And for us, it's really starting to look at how can we balance the opportunity that we have with AI, both from a productivity standpoint, from a security standpoint, looking at how we can really leverage that emerging technology to strengthen our defences, but also balancing that against the risk. And obviously, very topical over the last couple of weeks, the new emerging models that could potentially support adversaries in getting into our environment even quicker. It's now, I think, more than ever important to have those conversations about how we make sure that we're keeping pace, right? And that we're really recognising the challenges that technology stack brings. I think similar to the point that was made by Karen, I think we're really starting to see that positioning of cyber as a board level risk. It's something that for us it is discussed as that business risk, and something that we need to all be aware of. Cyber security is no longer the responsibility of the security team, right? It's not the responsibility of one team or one function. It's a business responsibility, and actually everyone has their part to play in, and kind of coming round from that in terms of that growing focus and the emerging threats that we're seeing, not just from AI, but really across the board, seeing cyber criminals and threat actors become more sophisticated in the way that they're operating. We are also facing the challenge of a growingly complex regulatory landscape that specifically for my position is extremely important to understand and be aware of. I think we're seeing countries and governments around the world become more aware that cyber is something that we need to regulate against, and something that we need to really hold organisations accountable to. So I think all these challenges kind of just emphasise the importance of having a really strong network around you to support you. I think we're very lucky here in Scotland that even looking across the panel today and when we were doing our prep sessions, I think we're very fortunate to have a really strong community here. And as someone in industry who spends a lot of time dealing with very complex kind of global technology delivery challenges and dealing with several kind of distributed economies, Scotland genuinely does stand out in terms of having the environment where you can share with your peers and you can reach out to those around you for support and advice, right? I think we all need to recognise that this isn't a challenge amidst everything I've listed off there that we can tackle alone, and that collaboration really is the best step forward in supporting us tackle these changes and issues that we're seeing across the board to make sure we're mitigating that risk, I think, as best as we can.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the point about community is a really important one, and we'll probably touch on that as the discussion progresses. And it leads me very nicely into my question for Keith. So Keith, the title of this session is Making Scotland a Hard Target. What does being a hard target actually mean at a national scale? And is this about resilience or deterrence or capability, or is it a mix of all three?
Yeah, well, thanks for the difficult question. So as you can see, folks, I'm the exercising lead, and we'll probably come back to that. But prior to that, I've spent quite a number of years 24/7 on call to bring together the multi-agency support that we've offered to organisations who find themselves in the wrong end of a significant attack. So to answer the question simply, I guess I could say it's all three of them and leave it at that, but I think it justifies a bit more explanation. So this is not about making Scotland unhackable. That's unrealistic and just would never happen. But it is about making sure that we are prepared to absorb that shock when it happens, and also prepared to respond effectively and recover quickly. So what we do is really minimize the impact of the attack that has a direct impact on services or delivery of services or manufacturing, your operational business, so that the pain is really minimized. At a national level, what we do is, as you alluded to in your introduction, Alan, was we have our strategies and the action plans, and we have structures like the Cyber Scotland Partnership, the group of 22 influential organisations who have reached in the various aspects of our communities. And then at the centre, we've developed this coordination capability that will provide that element of support, because we've lived and breathed quite a lot of that. And what this does is all of that contributes to essentially target hardening Scotland and improving that response capability for the inevitable time that it does actually happen.
Great, thanks very much. So we're now on to the questions from Slido, and the most upvoted one is a great one to kick us off. I think I'll go to you, Jess, initially with this, but I'm sure we've all got thoughts. So what is the most effective way that a small nation can compete for cyber talent against larger nations, bigger salary markets, and investment opportunities?
This is a really interesting question, and let me just preface this as well with, I think what we're currently facing a challenge on in the industry more broadly is not just the concept of being able to grow and retain cyber talent, but also, as we've mentioned, cyber is now an all-encompassing business risk. So how do we make sure that other talent that we're bringing in other areas of our organisations also have the understanding of cyber and the risk that comes with that. So for me, I think that we all have our part to play in ensuring that we're bringing through that next generation of cyber talent, and especially now in the current day and age, where I think there's a lot of fear around us being replaced by technology and how we perform our roles, really ensuring that we have that entry level kind of talent opportunities available within our organisation, specifically when it comes to high risk, high reward areas like cybersecurity, ensuring that we have internships, we're leveraging apprenticeship routes. Even last week I was having a really great conversation with some of our training partners about funded opportunities that we have here in Scotland to put under 25s through HNDs in cyber focused topics. Right? And I think that quite often we look at how we can get the top talent in every single area of cybersecurity, but actually bringing in that young, keen, hungry talent that we have across our nation. We're a nation of hard workers, right? How do we capitalise on that? How do we make sure that those individuals have the opportunity and recognise? And I think, Alan, you mentioned there the concept of retention, right? I think that growing that talent up and recognising you might not be able to hold on to it forever. However, cyber is something that affects all of us in any way, shape or form from a security perspective. So growing that talent and seeing them potentially go on to another role in another company, knowing that actually you're benefiting that broader ecosystem, right? So yeah, in summary, I think really focusing on those entry-level career paths, looking at the opportunities that we have here in Scotland for funded academic progression, and ensuring that as organisations operating within our country, that we're not just focusing on that tech talent, but also how do we ensure cyber literacy across the broader workforce.
Great, and from the Scotland Is perspective.
Yeah, and so I absolutely agree. I don't think as a nation we will win the salary war. Right, but that's fine, because what we do offer in Scotland is careers as opposed to jobs in cyber, and lots of the things that Jess is talking around, we already do some of that in Scotland. So the Cyber First is embedded in our curriculum at schools. We have a Cyber Drive programme at our colleges, which is almost like a cyber pop-up lab, which was funded by Scottish Government, that gets our high school, young people interested in cyber careers. We have a placement programme which matches students who are currently studying into paid internships within industry. We've got Scotland Is scholarships, which helps our young people through their exams and accelerates them into cyber careers. There's Digital Critical Friends, where we've got industry go into schools. So actually, when you look at what Scotland is doing to support that growth of skills, for that talent pipeline, we're doing lots, and industry is backing and behind all of that, as are the partnerships and our partners. But I think, as Jess says, where we have that bottleneck just now, and so we do a survey annually to, it's a bit of a health check on the sector, but where we have that bottleneck just now is in that mid-level skill. And some of that is because of the changes of COVID and people are hybrid working. There's less of that mentoring capability within businesses to bring in that junior talent to help grow them and grow their skill base within businesses. So we're looking at, how do we fix that? Because that is this bottleneck. We need these students to be coming in through with knowledge and experience that they can hit the ground running, because for an SME, we don't have the time, the bandwidth, or the budget to wait 2 and 3 years before some of these people can actually make an impact in the business. But certainly in Scotland, as Maggie said, that whole collaborative piece, that's one of our very strong points, and as a whole sector and a whole nation, we're working to solve those problems.
And I don't think we're going to solve the retention problem because, we can't compete on salary. But what we can compete on is that whole ecosystem that we use to nurture people to get the best out of them. We've got a programme through the Centre of Excellence at Abertay University where we help people coming out of the military to transfer some of the skills that they have into, through a 6-week pen testing course, a 6-week OSINT course, a 6-week cyber leadership course, because everybody has transferable skills. And the advantage is that they're at a point in their career that they don't want to travel the world. They want to live and work in Scotland. And we've got skills all through. We've talked before about the Highlands and Islands. There's some fantastic skills there. And people say, I don't want to leave there. I want to be able to either work from home, or I'll come once a month, or I'll come once a week to come and see you, and then work as a team there. But a lot of that, and COVID's shown that we can do that remote working. It's not preferred for all jobs, but actually it's making the best use of the resources that we've got. And I think what we've got with the apprenticeships, the graduate apprenticeships, when I worked at Lloyds Banking Group, I had on a Monday I had 3 apprentices straight out of high school, 3 doing grad programme, and firms are supporting that to be able to then say, we are here to help develop you into a programme. Nobody's doing a job for life anymore. Yeah. That used to be, that's the tradition that people would do. But actually, if we nurture them around the ecosystem in Scotland, and we start doing shares with public sector so that we get that private sector experience within the public sector, so we can all bonus and become a thriving nation.
And we've distributed millions of pounds in cyber upskilling across Scotland, so across public sector, industry and the third sector with support from Scottish Government. So we're not just taking a stab in the dark at how we do this, we've actually got backing from the whole of the economy to make sure that we're making those changes for the greater good of Scotland's resilience across all sectors.
And the STEM piece is not just cyber,
Yep.
is it? So we're looking at diversity, we're looking at broader STEM, so we work across engineering, CEDA, etc. We work across all of those to be able to then say, if cyber, people are a bit scared of cyber as a term, and if you say resilience or you say risk, actually that brings it home so that people can say, well, actually, I don't want to be a coder, but what I want to do is I want to work in cyber. What can I do? So it's actually being able to articulate the positions that people can either grow into, develop into, but you don't have to be, as movies portray, you sitting in a darkened room with a hoodie on. So that's not, that's what you do, Jess, isn't it? So, if you look at it, it's about making best use of all of the folks that are coming through, because we need to make sure that our people are prepared.
Yeah.
I think there's a really important point you make there, Maggie, on that, and that is, are we really investing in the staff we already have? In the public sector, this might be really important because we have a lot of people doing good jobs, but there's probably skill sets in there that we could exploit and for their advantage as well as ours. But actually, do they really understand that cyber is quite a diverse group of skills? And I think with an SC3, we've got the techies, and we've got people with very different skill sets. So it's very evident that you can bring people in if you show them that there's a room for them here, and then offer them the support. And they're already committed to the organisation, and they're already mostly committed to remaining in Scotland, and you will lose people naturally, of course, and you should be prepared for that. But I think we've got something to break here, because people do think of cyber and think real techies. And it's so much wider than that. And we need that diverse, and that's been proven time and time again in the private sector. We need the diverse set of skills, and we just haven't tapped it in the way I think we probably could or should.
Well, we did, when I was doing some work down south, was the MOD did a review of a skill set review to be able to say, how can you then retrain people? So in all of that, do you do coding at home of an evening, or there was a whole raft of developed by a psychologist, a whole raft of questions that came out and said, would you be prepared to learn? Would you be prepared to train? Would you be able to? And out of, I haven't got the stats to hand at the moment, but they ended up taking a chap who was a driver for the MOD, who did coding at night, and who ended up being a really fantastic incident responder, because it was about identifying the skills that you already have in your organisation, and then you can either upskill or you can invest in them to do something different, and you get payback from them.
I think what we're also seeing, similarly to that diversity in talent, is diversity in roles as well. Roles that exist today maybe didn't exist 2 years ago. We're really starting to change how we position a lot of the talent conversations around cyber, and it isn't now just focused on those technical career paths. So ensuring that for those who may not be technically minded, understanding that this could be a career for them. And likewise for those who are technically minded, understanding that there are so many different roles and opportunities for you to progress through that stream as well. So yeah, I think the diversity in talent, but also the diversity of actually the roles that we're seeing coming in, and how we need to position those both across public sector, private sector, third sector, I think is generally something that I think helps drive that conversation forward.
But we've got some school kids coming into the exhibition hall today just to see what, what the topics are. There are obviously some closed topics, but seeing what the topics are, seeing what companies are looking for, and being able to then say, well, actually, that's quite what I'd like to try and position myself with. But we've been doing that across schools and trying not to just concentrate on the Central Belt, because that's not where all the schools are. It's not where all the talent is, and using some networks that we've got to cover the whole of Scotland.
Thank you, panel. I think that was an incredibly comprehensive answer to the first slide of the question. But I think that's a really important point. And the next question that we have may create a similar amount of conversation, and I think is, again, a really important one, because this is a question which I think underpins a lot of the discussions that are happening in this venue with NCSE and amongst others around strategic direction and capability development. And that question is, I think, again, for the entire panel, although we have, I think all of us had this conversation before, how do you measure progress in national cyber resilience in a practical, meaningful way?
It's hard. It is hard. So we've got, so we launched the Strategic Framework for Cyber Resilience Scotland in November. We have a number of action plans that sit under those, and a lot of deliverables, and one of which is how do you get out to the population the message of how to protect themselves, raise the awareness of cyber as an opportunity, and cyber attacks as a challenge. And all the things that I said earlier about the education piece and going out to communities, how do you know that you've turned the dial on it? And that's really, really quite hard. There are some KPIs, there's some numbers you can say, I'm going to reach 4,000 students, or I'm going to do X, or I'm going to see an uptick in the number of people who are doing computing science degrees. But I think what you can do is you can show that direction of travel. And if we talk to people in schools or whatever, how much do you know, how much do you care is a big question. So it's some of it is intangible, and other bits I think we can be relatively comfortable when we've got some straight numbers to do. Scotland is, for example, is the cyber cluster. You have a target for how many small businesses you want to get in, but how do you get the message out? Yeah. How do we do that?
So no, definitely, and we utilise the whole of the ecosystem network to do that. sorry. I have a frog in my throat, I'm sorry. But I think a lot of it is not around how many attacks have come in, but actually, to your point earlier on, Keith, is how we recover from that. So how many are we not seeing that's taken down whole businesses? How many attacks are we preventing that's not taken down whole of public services? Because we're in a situation now where everyone accesses everything on a digital platform. So everyone, us and your customers and business, expect to have access to your solution all the time when they're ready. So if we can manage on, I suppose it's that capability, making sure we have that capability so it's harder to breach, so there's not any of the latency for anybody, and it's less about how many times have I stopped it, it's more about how we've managed to absorb and carry on. And I think that's when we will see the dial being moved, but utilising networks like Cyber Scotland Partnership, like the community, the whole ecosystem from industry to government to the energy sector, and we need to get that message out, and we need more of our SMEs to put cyber at the very top of their priority list.
I mean, Keith talked about the surveys that we do as well, but those are only ever a moment in time, aren't they?
Yes, but I think they're useful indicators. And actually, if I reflect back, because I'm very old, to when we launched the first strategy back in 2015, I think we're happy to accept some criticism that we had a very good idea, with a really solid idea about what we wanted to do, but we hadn't actually put any real measures in, at the early stage. We learned from that and we changed that next time round. And if you can't sort of measure some indicators, you really have no idea whether the things that you're doing that feel instinctively right are really making any difference. So we do have to have some measures in there, and we do accept they're not exact,
Yeah.
but they give you, as you said, Maggie, that strong indication that you're turning the dial in certain areas. So there are a whole range of measures that are indicative of that, that journey, making progress. And indeed, as we've seen, Alan, as you know, within that, there are some areas that we're still actually a bit alarmed about and concerned about because we haven't turned the dial far enough. And therefore, what can we do about it? Well, we'll actually put some very positive interventions focused on shifting that dial. And only by measuring things can you actually realise that, and that's where we are just now.
You don't want to spend all your time measuring and not all your time, or as much as your time
No,
doing.
absolutely. But if it directs,
Yeah.
focused activity, then it's valid. Of course.
Absolutely.
I think if you look at our cluster, so we kicked off our cluster back in 2018 with 120 cyber companies. That's what was in Scotland at the time. We are now a cluster of well over 400. So I think that's evidence of that dial being moved.
Definitely. Great. Keith, you just mentioned activities to kind of move the dial in specific areas. And there's a question on Slido, which was hovering near the bottom, but has jumped to the top. So let's tackle that one now. If you could change one policy, one behaviour, and one investment priority tomorrow, what would it be?
So I think maybe because I'm the exercising workstream lead, Alan, it's maybe not a great surprise, but I think the thing, when I'm out speaking to organisations, particularly at a leadership level, the thing that seems to land very clearly is when you take an organisation through an experience that they've heard about, the words haven't landed, but when you take them through an exercise, it sort of lands with them and connects. So I kind of wish we'd been doing more of this and putting more effort into our understanding how effective that approach could be. So there's nothing better than, and I've exercised a couple of organisations in the last week, in fact one yesterday, it pulled me away from here. But it's very useful to go through that process, because then they understand the words that are written on paper and are more able to do something about it. So I wish we'd done more of that in the early stage, and I wonder if that would have had a real measurable impact. And I still believe that this is the best way for organisations to understand everything that falls out of cyber. It just falls into context, having lived, that experience. So
I think that's where the
one thing.
storytelling helps, doesn't it?
It is
Because a
part
lot
of
of
that,
people
of course,
say,
yeah.
well, can you tell us about an incident, and can you talk about the impact on your business and whether it was catastrophic, or how did you arrive at a better outcome than other people?
Yeah. So the one thing that struck me a few years ago, and it's no names, no practical, but I do remember speaking to a head of IT who was involved, unfortunately, in a fairly significant incident of theirs. And despite being aware of all this, he actually said, I really honestly never thought that this was actually possible and would happen. Obviously thinks differently now. And that really struck me at the time, that he knew all the words, to the song and could probably sing it, but really didn't believe it.
But maybe it needs to
something
be
in that.
mandatory. Maybe there is just a mandatory level of cybersecurity that is required, and maybe it starts with, and I know there's bits around cyber essentials, but maybe it starts with the public sector of, if you're procuring anything from the supply chain, there's a level of security that is required, because I think if we look at that business continuity, we're looking to raise everybody's game. So we've done it over the years. We've rolled people out to go. We didn't think it would happen to us, but here you go. And this is the impact it's had, and businesses have been lost, and huge amounts of profit have been lost. And we've done that, and we've been doing that for a long time. And some people are getting it, and others aren't. It's that way we were trying to kind of almost scare them to death and then show them how to fix it, almost. But maybe there's a level of, and we've done, along with the Cyber Scotland Partnership and Scottish Government, as I said, we've rolled out hundreds and thousands of pounds, millions on cyber essentials. But to your point, it can't be a tick box exercise. It absolutely cannot be, because it's just well, that's fine. We're compliant here and here and here, so we'll be good. And that's the part we need to get away from. This cannot just be a compliance journey.
Yeah, and I think it's recognising that compliance doesn't equal security. It never has done, and I don't think it ever will. I think when we get into the bad habit of associating a certification with having a certain level of security, there's a certain danger with that, right? I think what we're seeing now is the need to move a lot faster and actually broaden the conversation for not just looking at kind of cybersecurity, but looking at resilience overall, similar to, I think, the point, Keith, that was made by you on how do we absorb that impact. It's actually starting to shift the mindset of you are going to get targeted, you are going to suffer through incidents, whether that is cyber-enabled frauds, whether that is a phishing incident, whether that's a ransomware incident. You will have to deal with these challenges. So how do you ensure that your services, your systems, your business model is built in such a way that it is resilient, right? It's not just looking at your disaster recovery, it's about looking at your business continuity planning as well. How do you operate if your systems are unavailable? How do you test that? How do you make sure that resilience is built in end to end? What we're seeing now is that shift in thinking of security being something that you respond to, and you have your antivirus and you have your tools that sit there and do the job, but actually how do you broaden that and really consider it as a full end-to-end resilience challenge, right? And build out your systems, your services and your processes to account for that challenge, and definitely not kind of presuming that if we tick the box of cyber essentials, for example, that yep, you're secure, you're done. Because I think we can probably all agree that's not the case, right?
Not the case, no.
There's probably one other thing to be slightly disruptive here. So whilst I'm happy we give ourselves a little gentle pat on the back for some of the good stuff that we've done, and I'm certain that we have with the public sector and the third sector. Maggie, you mentioned we are a nation of SMEs. Mm-hmm. You know, that is a large number of small businesses in the SME market. Do you know, we haven't cracked the SMEs. You know, providing knowledge and guidance is not enough for them. And I think and I guess at a UK level, this will be the same. We need to revisit and understand why SMEs are not as engaged in this as we hoped they would be. And there's something about, you know, a real change in approach. There has to be sort of a carrot and a stick. You know, you have to have an element. But they need supported in a different way. And I think the way that we've been doing it hasn't really been as effective as it has been within the third sector and the public sector. So there needs to be a different approach, and I think we need to revisit that one.
Absolutely, because I think two things really is that we've concentrated on the public sector because we can't ask the private sector to do things that the public sector is not prepared to do. So we've been doing that resilience piece for the public sector, including the exercising and everything else. You've already highlighted, Karen, what some of the challenges and inhibitors are for small businesses, but Keith, you're absolutely right, that's the big gap for us, and we need to, that's probably where we need to put our emphasis, whether there's tools and techniques which are available that we can roll out via, so policing have brought cyber and fraud together, so whether there's some things there that we can roll out from some of the lessons from other resilience centres around the United Kingdom. And I think that's where we have to start changing that, because there's small businesses that employ in a village, employ half the village.
Yeah. So the other thing, Maggie, is we've all matured in this journey. You know, we're saying the rest of the UK, but actually, my old friend Claude and Copilot yesterday were very busy before I came on here doing some of my research. And it was interesting to learn, because we'd done a piece of work a few years ago looking at what else was good and strategy-wise, you know, across the globe. But now you can do it in 30 seconds. So yesterday in 30 seconds, it was identified to me that, in actual fact, Singapore have a fairly effective model for SMEs that is about, you know, support for SMEs and taking all the things that are preventing SMEs from engaging away. And it sort of felt and smelt like ACD for SMEs. Probably something catchy there. And they'd managed to achieve, by providing the right support and almost no effort for SMEs, a sign-up option with incentives that captured nearly 50,000 SMEs and you know, and known and trusted cybersecurity services.
Yep.
So there's something for us now that's changed over the years that's probably only happened in the last couple of years because we've all been maturing together. It's time for a revisit of that, and I think there's something there for us collectively to think about.
Karen, just as a final word on this before we move on to what will unfortunately have to be the last question, but are there partnerships or funding opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses based in Scotland to enhance their cyber resilience?
So we do have some bits of funding, so come and speak to me at the Cyber Scotland Partnership stand around Cyber Essentials. I think the upskilling funding is all gone, unfortunately, but come and speak to us because there's lots of opportunities and connections that we can make. There's agencies and other partners that we can put you in touch with. So there are opportunities. Please don't miss out on them. Come and speak to the partnership and we'll make sure that we guide you in the right way.
Excellent. So we have 2 minutes left and I have one more question for us to take a quick stab at. So what are the risks for Scotland as a nation, and is it the same as the risk to the rest of the UK? Maggie?
That's a very nice question for the last question, because we could probably spend the next 20 minutes on that one. So we're a nation of small businesses, but we have got some obviously some very big and mature things like financial services and oil and gas are a lot more mature than the small business piece. We are a similar target because we're seen by our nation state adversaries as the whole entity rather than Scotland. But I think because we've got quite a big public sector as well, there's quite a big threat to the public sector and to healthcare, etc. So I don't see it as hugely different.
No, I would agree. I don't see that it's hugely different. I suppose the plus point is we are a smaller, more collaborative nation. So we can move quickly, and we do move quickly, but I don't think that we are any more secure in Scotland than the rest of the UK. I don't think the challenges are any different. We can just,
To get the basics right.
yes.
Get the basics right.
I think the main point is cyber criminals don't discriminate, right? They will target any business of any size, of any maturity, with any technology stack or process in place. So the risks that we face in Scotland are no different to the broader UK. They're no different to most of the rest of the world, and that's only a risk that's going to evolve, as was kind of mentioned. I think within Scotland, we have the benefit of agility. We have the benefit of partnerships, and we have the benefit of that workforce that we mentioned earlier, where we have a lot of very talented and very hardworking people that we can tap into to drive that message forward.
And we have Keith.
Not for long, not for long.
Yeah, just on that, so beyond the SME point which I've made, I think there's something about our public sector that is quite interconnected, and that creates risk and opportunity. And I think that's maybe slightly different.
So I think there's supply chain, concentration risk, all of those things, but that's a common thing across the globe. So if the door's open, folks will come in.
Indeed, I think it's nice to finish on a note of collaboration. So we'll have to end it there. But a huge thank you to the panel. Thank you to you for joining us and for your questions. And if you would like to know more, then please do go and take a wander down Scotland Street. Thanks very much, folks.
Thank you.